Welcome, everyone, to the Feminine Outliers podcast, your dose of fun, life advice, and experiences from two African professional women living and working in the Western world. We are your hosts, Cholwe Mandona
and Zelda Wasau.
And we are excited to have you here with us again. So, this week is a special week in that we are celebrating International Women's Day. It's going to be this Friday, and we thought it would be great to reflect on our upbringing and what it means to grow up as an African woman. As you guys, right? Um, I think it's just a good time and just see how far we've come and where we hope to go. And so it would just be a good time to do that. And so if you could join us, just, sit back, relax as we dive into that. But before we go into the theme of the episode, of course, we have to do our unlearning pieces. And so why don't we get right ahead to it? So I'll start. What am I unlearning this week? So for me, it's actually a good one because it's actually something I'm learning right now as we speak. And I am unlearning not focusing on your weaknesses. I don't know if that makes sense. It's a very simple sentence.
And it's a good one.
Okay. And I'm not confusing my negatives here. So yeah, I'm learning not focusing on your weaknesses. It's just, as a person who's competitive, I want to say I'm naturally competitive. And just growing up, I always thought, you know what, why don't I put my energies in everything? So my strengths and then also my weaknesses. I also have a tendency to just absorb information. I love learning. So I just think to myself, I'm capable of getting better at doing something. And the thing is that because of my competitive nature, I feel like I need to win at everything. So at least that was my thinking in the past. And so a lot of my energy was always focused on just doing everything, just wanting to be quote unquote the super achiever. But it just came out of just that natural zeal to do more, to be better. But now I look at it and I realize there are some skills that I have that are stronger than others. And I realized that the more I spend time doing those things, I'm actually, one, happier, and two, it just feels it gives me this sense of fulfillment. So it's almost like my God-given gift where I'm not working hard on it. And even when people find it like, oh wow, this is you just seem so it seems so natural. I seem so talented. And of course I don't sit on these skills. I still practice them, but people look at it and they just think, wow, you either put in so much work, and then I realize, no, I'm not actually putting in so much work. And it's just making my life much easier. And I think it's just something I'm realizing that, yeah, you don't need to focus on your weaknesses. Now, I realize that sometimes you still need your weaknesses to survive in this world. And I think this is where delegation is necessary, or developing good relationships where you can lean on another person, to the person who is better at your weakness. You can leverage their joy that they get from doing that thing, and then just leverage it in a way that it also serves you. So yeah. So now moving forward, it's just honing in on my strengths and serving people with those strengths. And just going forward with it and just being proud of it and being grateful.
You're only as strong as your weakest link. But I know this is referring
Mm,
to like groups, so like group work and stuff like that. But it also applies to our lives, in which kind of we're only as strong as our weaknesses ish. Not exactly,
mm,
but like something like that. In the sense that, you know, and as much as you need to focus on what you're good at and get better at it, sometimes your weaknesses can be holding you back. And so
mm,
if you work at um, improving them, getting better at what you're weak at, that can really it can really push you forward. It can really elevate you and help you, propel you towards your goals. Just because, I mean, I feel like you can ignore weaknesses, but not all the
mm,
times. Like there are certain situations in which it doesn't really matter, but there are going to be other situations in which your weaknesses will definitely hold you back. So being aware of them is so important too, for one, and then now trying to work at them is important as well. Of course, keep on working at your strengths, but then again, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So
mm-hmm,
what is it that is holding you back? I think it's so important to know that, because a lot of times, like even if you get like reviews at work or anything, if you get any critique or something, it's most likely going to be based off your weakness.
yeah,
And they'll be like, you need to improve this or that. And most likely it's a result of what you're weak at. So I think it's just so important to know your weaknesses and also work at them. Like we
mm,
just can't ignore them and focus only on your strengths. It's all about being well balanced. And, you know, I mean, obviously you don't have to get so, um, not overwhelmed. That's the word I'm trying to trying to think of. Obsessed with your weaknesses,
yeah,
but knowing them and then working the ones you can work at, particularly. And I feel like you can work on all your weaknesses, but it's going to be different for different situations. Like this weakness would be something you need to work at for this situation, whereas another weakness might be something that you need to work at in another situation because it's holding you back in that particular situation. So
mm-hmm,
I think that's a good one, is
mm,
that's a good unlearning of not like, thinking about your weaknesses.
yeah,
I like it.
yeah. So, what are you unlearning, Zell?
I would say from my standpoint, I'm unlearning having work like consume me, and like when I'm working.
Mm,
Essentially, I'm unlearning having work taking over everything when I'm working. So, I recently came back from Kenya, and then I had to work 15 days straight.
whew,
And I was really worried about it. I was really concerned because, so technically on my work weeks, because I work 7 days on, 7 days off, my work weeks, because it's a 12-hour shift and you never know. Some days you might be busy the whole 12 hours. Some days you might be able to come back early. But essentially, I usually prepare like my food. Like I work Tuesday to Monday. So I usually prepare my food like Monday for the whole entire week. I
mm-hmm,
usually do the cleaning around the house and setting things up. If I'm changing my sheets and all that stuff, I do all that before I go to work so that I
mm-hmm,
don't have to do any of it when I'm at work. Now, the week I'm at work, technically that usually works. But so I had now 15 days I was working this time.
yeah,
So obviously I didn't have food prepared for a whole 2 weeks. And
mm-hmm,
then I also come back from Kenya and only had one day in
mm-hmm,
between my trip and coming back from my trip and starting work. And of course, now I had to do laundry, getting ready. There's just so many things I had to do that I didn't finish everything that I wanted to do, like finish cleaning the house, um, do all the laundry I wanted to do. I did most of it, but I didn't do everything I wanted to do. All the small tasks that you set for yourself to do. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
finish it. And I was kind of disappointed starting out work on Monday because I was like, oh my goodness, this is bad because now the house is gonna be it's gonna be a mess, or it's not gonna be like perfect the way I want it to be because I don't have time to do it. Then I told
Mm-hmm.
myself, you know what? Do things um slowly. Like break them down. So
Mm-hmm.
if you haven't cleaned the floor or swept the floor and you want to do that, okay, do it on a Monday. On Tuesday, you can put away any of the extra small things you haven't put away. On Wednesday, you can clean the bathroom. On Thursday, you can change your sheets and do laundry for the sheets, change your sheets, do that. Basically, I broke it down to the point that I was still getting things done. The
Mm-hmm.
stuff that I wanted to do get done, I was still getting them done because usually I have some days off to finish all that stuff, but I did not have that luxury. And I was like, you know what, just doing these things every now and then is so important. Like I don't have to let
Mm-hmm.
work consume me to the point that I come home, I'm so exhausted and I can't do anything. No,
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to come home and do some things. And what part of my motivation was a lot of my colleagues have, kids.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly if you think about the females who, taking care of their kids, they still have the same work schedule that I do. But then they have to go home and you have a young child who needs to be fed, cleaned, homework, and
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to deal with that, but they have to deal
Mm-hmm.
with that. So I realized, what excuse do I have for
Mm-hmm.
letting some of these small things go just because I'm exhausted? And I had to change my mindset and be like, no, just have a plan. You don't have to do all of it on the same night, but break
Mm-hmm.
it down and so you can get things done. And that was the same mindset I decided to do with my exercising, because usually on my work week it's very hard for me to exercise. I mean, I would exercise sometimes in the evening, but it was a lot of times it was willpower, sheer willpower. When you come home like at 7:30, you're hungry, you need to eat, um, and then you need to exercise, and my body is just like done with life at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I still had notes I have to do, and so
Mm-hmm.
exercising would just not happen. I told myself, create a schedule, get more organized, wake up in the morning and exercise. So try and sleep on time. I didn't fully all the time sleep on time, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. But I can tell you for 14 out of the 15 days, I slept before 12, which was an accomplishment for me because I'm usually the kind of person who sleeps after midnight. But I would sleep
Mm-hmm.
maybe 10:30, 11, 11:30. And
Amazing.
I was like, I can't use work as an excuse. Like, my life cannot stop because I'm at work. And so that's
Nice.
what I learned this week. And it just means creating a schedule, being organized, and figuring it out. Because
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do the day when you have kids and then you have to deal with that? I mean, your life can't stop.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I learned.
Wow, Zell, you just hit the nail on the head. Because I completely agree with this. Um, and I also am a strong believer about enjoying your life even as you work,
Mhm.
and enjoying your life every single day, because it's not a rehearsal, right? So if you know how people, it's very common for people to approach their work this thing of where over the weekend, that's when they relax, and then Monday comes and it's like, oh, it's Monday, and it's a very common commentary when you go to work and people are like, oh, it's Monday, my computer is not working, oh, it's Monday, the coffee machine is broken, oh, it's Monday. And for me, I'm just like, it's just Monday. Tomorrow is Tuesday. The next time is Wednesday. And, like, and I obviously don't speak that out to people when they say, oh, it's Monday. I know exactly what they mean. They have to get
Mhm.
themselves, back into that mindset of having to work. But then I still think to myself, it's still your day, it's still your life. So
Right.
I think one thing that you brought up with the people that have kids, it kind of reminds me of how every day, even during work days, I try to do something that I love. Like I try to, I just try to do something, whether it's having a really nice meal for dinner, or it's going to the gym for like a yoga class with my favorite instructor. It could be like, let's say, the lunch hour, or it could be after work, or it could be in the morning. So I always try to find a moment in my day, actually, where I'll just do something that makes me happy. I remember one just a few weeks back, I just decided to make pancakes. I can't remember which day it was, but it was during the week. And I know some people might think, oh, pancakes are, maybe I should do it over the weekend when I have time. But that's just, adding an extra like maybe 30 minutes to your day. But it, for me, it makes such a huge difference, because once I have my pancakes, then I go to work and I treat everyone happy, because I'm like, I just have so much joy, because then, like I got myself a treat. So it's not like I go to work and I'm like, oh, it's because of the job. That's why I didn't have pancakes. It's like, no, I got my pancakes. Now I'm coming to work. So just having that mindset shift, I think, helps. So I think there's just that thing. And I think with kids, it just sort of comes at a point where it's a duty, it's a responsibility. But I think practicing it even before you have kids, where it's like, how can you look after yourself first and then look after others with the work that you do. So I agree with you.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good one for all of us. Good
Yeah,
reminder.
good reminder. No, good reminder. I love that. I really, really do. So that's good stuff. So, speaking of looking after ourselves, we are going to transition into the topic of the day. Um, so, growing up as an African woman, um, like I said earlier, it's International Women's Day this week, and shout out to all the women. Shout out to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would be a great time to reflect, and just, just have a chat. And I was just thinking actually today. I was like, how was my upbringing as an African woman? Like what was the messaging that I got? And yeah, I and now as I look back, I this is what I would say to that is, I don't know, I grew up growing up, I would say I grew up carefree, if if that makes sense. I grew up in an environment where I had both of my parents working parents, so I obviously had to, thankfully too, I would say, uh, went to school, um, all the way up to my 12th grade. So obviously, school was a big part of my life. Um, I initially started off in an all girls Catholic school, so I was around girls for a good 9 years of my education, and then I moved on to co-education school. So that obviously there was a shift, because then there were guys there. Um, but in my in that upbringing, I think I would say I learned, especially it was a Catholic school, so I learned a lot about discipline. I think that was one thing I would say was the takeaway, because there was a lot of tradition, there's a lot of rituals in
Mm.
how things were done, even just, you know, when it came to, for example, addressing a teacher. I don't know if this was the same for you, Zell, but um, back home we would address a teacher by their last name, and we would use the word Mister or Miss or Mrs. Um,
Hmm.
so it would never be by their first name. So
Does
there would be,
anyone ever do it by the first name?
I don't know actually. Wait, you're
I,
right.
I don't know, because I would never dream of addressing the teachers like that. But
Okay, you know what? I guess what's happening is that I'm thinking about when you get to college, at least if you go to like an American college where teachers would just say, "Ah, just call me by my first name, it's fine." So maybe I'm thinking about
um,
that. But you're right. No, you're right. Yeah. Okay. Well, um um yeah, no. So I learned discipline pretty early, and I think it has served me really well. Where it's something that I'm still using up to this day. Like the idea of, like, I remember having to polish my shoes before I go to school. Obviously, make
mhm.
sure my uniform is ironed, my hair was done, um, and actually, for me, my situation was a little bit different because speaking of hair, um, if I remember correctly, at the school that I went, you either had to have your hair braided or in some sort of neat fashion, or you cut it. And I just went with the short hair option.
Cutting. Yeah, I
Yep.
remember the picture of you without, yeah, without hair. And I was like,
Exactly.
oh, it's such a way without hair.
I
Wait, so
know.
in the school you went to, when you say braid the lines, I don't know, because I know in Kenya it's a thing in certain places where at certain schools they want you to braid your lines to the back. Like that's the only way if you're
Oh
braiding, it's braiding towards the back. Like
no.
well, I never
I
went to those schools, but I know people who went to those schools.
Interesting. No, wow, no, this is new to me. I think what I remember is that you had to braid. I think it was also, or you had to braid your natural hair. Um,
Mm.
so I don't
So you
I
couldn't
can't
add
remember now. I might
extensions.
be confusing my school experiences, but it was exactly, you couldn't add extensions. Um, and for me, I don't know why. I guess, like I said, sort of being raised in a sort of more carefree. I thought to myself, it's efficient to just cut your hair, and so just I just cut my hair. Um, um, and that was, yeah, and that was maybe the beginning of me being an outlier in that in that regard. Um, and also the other thing too about it, I would say, is that my mom never made me feel like, oh, you need to definitely, have your hair styled up. If it was cut hair, it was like, it looks good. It's, it's clean, it's moisturized. What else can you ask for hair? So, um, yeah. So that was that.
Complete opposite of me. I could not like the way you were like, oh, let me cut my hair. I was the opposite.
Yeah.
I was the one who wanted my hair down to my butt. Like,
Oh,
no, it was
yeah.
never going to be short. It had to be long.
Yeah. And where were you? I guess I'm curious. Where did you get that inspiration from to, like, say, okay, I want my hair down uh to my bottom? Like, where?
Honestly, I have no idea. I I've always liked long hair.
Oh, okay.
I really don't
Okay.
know. I was always
Yeah.
just one of those people who likes long hair. So, and I never had an issue with my hair being short. People
Yeah.
would look at me and be like, "Oh, your hair is long," but I, for me, long is down to my butt. That's how it
Ah,
was when I
okay.
was a child. I don't know where that came from. All I remember is
Yeah.
that's what I liked.
Yeah. No, I what I went with was with comfort. So anything that made me feel comfortable. So like for example, um like wearing dresses and wearing skirts, to me uh, like to me it felt like my legs were cold, right? Like just a simple reason, like I don't want to go out there because my legs are going to get cold. So why don't I just wear trousers? So then it's like, okay, I'm going to go wear trousers. And so like I liked feeling comfortable. So I didn't really gravitate towards um like this sense of like, I don't know, style. So I don't know if I was the most stylish person because I was just like,
Mhm.
this is easy, this is simple, I'm gonna go with it. um and so yeah, and so I think growing up like that and all the way up to graduation, um and I also saw with my parents just giving me that opportunity to think for myself what is good for me. Um and so I just developed my own sense of what I like and what I don't like very early on, and so sort of continue to navigate the world in that sort of lens, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Anything
Yeah.
um anything else that stood out about how you grew up?
mm. um I think the independence bit, um, where I think from early on I realized that you have to put in, you have to work hard in life. I think I saw that from both of my parents were working parents, um, and I could kind of see how they put in a lot of energy and effort, um, just a lot of diligence that they put forth, and they yeah, they were very good at their jobs as well. So one thing I noticed I from my parents was that they were very passionate, or should I say they they were joyful. So I never really got a sense of they don't like their jobs. Um, so it was always that they did their jobs well. Like they were very well networked. Especially, I know my mom it seemed like she just knew a lot of people at work. Like she just seemed to be this social connector. So I think I learned very early on that you have a passion for something, you put an effort in it, you reap the rewards, not only monetary, but also, and obviously to a certain extent, right? But also from a social networking perspective. So that's something that's stuck to me, and I think it obviously helped me to think, oh, of course, after I graduate from 12th grade, of course I want to go to college, of course I want to start working. So I already had that sort of mindset embedded in me, like on a daily basis, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And that independence that you um grew up with, um I would say I kind of grew up with a similar independence. Um
Mm,
I cuz I would say when I think about how I grew up, I did not grow up in a typical um in some ways I did not grow up in a typical way you'd think an African girl child would grow up in. Um, so, I mean, just for reference, I have two sisters. And so our parents were all about, I guess, empowering us as females.
mm,
And we
Mm,
you know, I grew up being told, you can be whatever you want to be. That was never a doubt in my mind. My dad would always say, "Yeah, you guys can do whatever you want to be. We'll support you guys. You guys can just put your mind to it." And I think it also helped that I didn't. For me personally, I did not go to. I would say I went to schools that had well-to-do people. If not, if not
mm,
well-to-do, maybe okay, maybe I'm being uh, modest, but some of the schools I went to were schools for the rich. So you have a total different mindset when you go to these schools and stuff because you know you're going to schools where I feel like females are empowered and you don't feel like
mm-hmm,
there's any per se difference between like you and a guy. So I never had any of that issue. That whole thing about what type of hair to wear to school. I didn't go to one of those schools. I could wear whatever I wanted to. I could do my hair however I wanted to do it. And I love that. And, you know, that was a great, it was just fun growing up. But I realized I grew up in a certain bubble. Um,
mm,
because I grew up knowing I could be whoever I wanted to be. I didn't really think there was anything like I would be held back because of being a female or anything like that. It was just when I started, getting older and started paying more attention to what was happening in the world in the world in Kenya. I started to realize, wait a minute, I can't do this. Like, for example, like I told you earlier, you know, the, my whole, you know, the chicken thing. I don't know if you remember me talking about the, the drumsticks. So in our culture, you tend to
oh,
leave
yeah.
the drumsticks for and the nice parts of the chicken, like the thigh, maybe the breast, and all that for the men. I've seen it happen traditionally, like in
Mm,
in certain homes, because you know how you say the man is the head of the home and do this. But at home, like drumsticks was my
mm-hmm,
favorite part of the chicken, and my parents would be like, "Oh yeah, you can go ahead and eat." Like they'd leave the drumstick for me, and I think each of me and my siblings had our own favorite parts to eat, and none of them were the
mm,
typical parts that would be accepted. Like not accepted, but if you go to a really traditional home, like there would
mm-hmm,
be, people look at you like, no, women, females don't do that. But I remember my parents telling me when you go to other
mm,
people's homes, please do not take the drumstick. Leave it for, the men and the elderly, the adults. Don't take the drumstick. I remember wondering why. Why was that a thing? So why are women left to take the less desirable part, and then the men take the more desirable part?
mm,
And I guess I was like, why? Because at home I never had that issue, you know. And that was some of the things I started to notice,
mm,
the older I got. So I started to realize that the way I was growing up, the way I was raised, it was very, I guess in a sense I would call it progressive. Like it was a very female
mm-hmm,
empowering. Like there was I never felt different as a female. I never felt like, you know, it was holding me back. But then I started to realize in general
mm-hmm,
society in Kenya, there is, you know, a push towards, there is a lot of gender inequality. And you only start to realize it the older you
mm,
get and you start to interact with more people and you're like, wait a minute, huh? Like the chicken thing was just an example. Like, I was like, really?
yeah,
Like my drumsticks, I have to. It was funny, but it was the same thing because I know growing up,
mm-hmm,
my dad would really want us to focus on, you know, being independent, being able to take care of ourselves. I think that was the most important thing, is that can you be able to take care of yourself as a woman? Like, he didn't want this whole thing of,
Mm-hmm.
oh, just depending on a man for everything. At least have your own credentials, have your own things going on for yourself. Then should you decide that, a man's going to take care of you, at least you have something to fall back on if anything happens,
Mm-hmm.
Like, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but
Yeah.
she had her own businesses that she would do, and she was very independent, and she would handle most of the money. And I remember I think my
Mm.
parents would be like, because my dad would make earn most of the money, give it, and my mom would handle the money. But there's also families which I realized in which the man would not do that, and it was very controlling. So because of that, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like my parents really empowered us to be independent and um, you know, not have to depend on people to do things. At least have
Mm-hmm.
something that we can fall back on in case anything happens. And I also realized that that might not necessarily be the same way that everyone's raised, because I was raised in a very
Mm.
female, male, doesn't matter, you can do it. But then I started to meet people out there, and
Mm-hmm.
it was like, when you hear how they speak and how they talk and how they do things, you're like, huh? Some of the things that used to irritate
Mm-hmm.
me, is going to that whole traditional thing, is I used to hate when guests come and then you have to, you're the girl, you have to go get a bucket or a basin, fill it with, get like a jug of hot water, and you have soap, and then you go and then you like help clean their hands in the living room. I hated it. I'm like, why can't they
Yeah.
go to the sink? Why can't they
Mm.
get up to the bathroom, go and wash their hands in the sink? Why do we have to do it? Pissed me off.
Yeah.
Even to today, I will be the kind of person who will be
Mm.
like, unless you have an illness that you can't, that's a separate issue. But if you have 2 feet that are working and you can get yourself to a bathroom, please go to the bathroom. Like, I used to hate it.
Yeah.
Like, I used to see mostly like the
Mm-hmm.
girls doing it. And I'm like, why do we have to do it? And then I also
Yeah.
remember once when
Yeah.
I was visiting my aunt's house, and I knelt down to get the food, and she was like, "Oh, you'll make a really good wife someday, because that's how you'd feed your husband." And in my head, I was like, "Feed who? Why would I kneel down for him?" Sorry. Like, who am I kneeling down for? Why?
Yeah.
Like, and it's when I start to hear these things, I start to
Mm.
realize this is how people think. This is how people are trained to think. But I do not think like
Mm-hmm.
that. In my head, I'm just like, no, why is this a thing?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so I definitely do remember
Yeah.
growing up different. I didn't realize it was different at the time. But I think it's also because my parents, used to stay in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And so they also had a more, a wider mindset. They've been exposed to more. So even the way they do things was not necessarily the same as people who have never left the country, for
Yeah.
example. So yeah, that's what I
Right.
remember.
Yeah. 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 You actually reminded me of the gender roles growing up and how it was um yeah, like this idea. I guess I got this idea generally that it was females that cooked. And then it was as you said, for example, you're giving the example of the person having to have that jug of water and washing people's hands or allowing them to have their hands washed. Um, there was definitely this idea that women are the ones that look after men, or they have this nurturing role. Um, and so and that's it's funny that you mentioned about that, the whole kneeling down, because for me this is where I think I struggled. There was a contradiction with me, because my mindset is very logical and very efficient driven from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would see things happening that did not make sense, it would be quite the struggle. So I would just struggle to say in my own mind, and of course, with African, I think a lot of African cultures, you're not seen as equal with people older than you. Um, and so
Yeah.
I couldn't just directly express my own thoughts. So I would have to, if I did have a different view, I think I would have to do it in a very quote unquote strategic, respectful way that still allows for that power dynamic to take place. So, but
Mhm.
in my mind, I was like, this is illogical. There's no benefits. There's no, like, as you just said, for example, like in that particular case, couldn't have the guests walked over to the sink to wash their hands? And that's the kind of thinking I would have, but I obviously wouldn't express that. And so I just felt like, okay, there's somewhere where my my logical mind and my the way I think about things can be utilized. And obviously now I'm in doing engineering, which makes a lot of sense because I'm just wired that way. um but it's so funny, like I'm just thinking to myself, if I had given in and just been in that atmosphere, I don't know if I would ever have known what I was capable of, like the potential that I really had, because there was just a strict following of these traditions. So you just reminded me of something like that.
I mean, when I think about traditions, one of the traditions that comes to mind that you mentioned um, is the like cooking. Who's responsible for cooking in the house?
Mm,
And I remember growing up, we
mm,
each had days would cook. Mostly my mom would cook, but then we'd also have days like Friday, maybe my sister or me. Between either Friday or Saturday, me and my older sister would cook. One of us would cook on each day. And then Sunday, my dad would cook.
mm,
And so at least my mom would have some days to like rest from cooking. And so I grew up seeing, and also my
mm,
dad is the kind of person who, he would cook good, he can cook good meals. And like when my mom, I know, left, was in the States for a whole month and she left me, my younger sister and my dad would be cooking for us. And we had a blast because, you know, he would cook like spaghetti, meatballs, things like that, that my mom would try to hold back on. And my dad would just cook all those fun things we enjoyed eating.
mm.
So I grew up because knowing that at least like men can cook.
Yeah.
Um, but
Mm.
I didn't realize that in some places the men don't even walk into the kitchen. Like they don't even step into the kitchen. And I was like, what?
Yes.
That shocked me because like I've gone
Yeah.
to some of my friends' places or family friends and the man is waiting to be served. And he's like waiting to be served because he's come home. He's like waiting for his food to come in. He doesn't step into the kitchen. He doesn't cook. And I was like, okay. I mean, that was new to me, but I know it's actually quite common in a lot of African homes. But for me, it's in my head. I
Mm.
was just like, huh? Like you don't cook, so you have to wait for
Mm-hmm.
it to be served. So either you have the house help or you know the the wife or the kids come serve you. And in my head, I'm like,
Mm.
why? Like, fine, even if you don't cook, can you step into the kitchen and get your own, like, serve yourself, get your food, deal with it? That was another tradition I just
Mm-hmm.
found
Yeah.
absurd in a sense. And I was just like,
Mm.
Why does it exist? Basically, for me, as you said, I think it's the same thing. Logic. Logically wise, if it doesn't make sense,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why are we doing it? Oh, I mean, what's the point? And I'm just thinking
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, when you have women who are working, if you're a kind of person who thinks you're going to come home, do nothing, then you expect the woman to do something, like you expect me to do something. Oh my goodness, it would never, ever work. Like, like you'd be out the door. I'd be like, out,
Mm,
out the door, because I can't do that. I mean, I grew up with roles being like gender roles being equal in a sense. Like there was nothing a woman
mm,
can do that a man
yeah.
can't do, and there's nothing a man can do that a woman can't do. So the
Mm,
roles should be, you
yeah.
know, equal and divided equally. So the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
of okay, so you're the only one who does the cooking, you're the
Yeah.
one who does this, it's not gonna work for me. It can't. Because I will look at you and I'll be like, okay,
Mm,
you'll serve tonight. Because I'm not, if I don't feel like cooking is there and you don't like, you'll starve. You have to learn how to cook. So I can't, I mean, that's why for me, a whole traditional mindset, like I can never, ever get married to someone with a traditional mindset. It would never work because I did not grow up
mm,
like that and I did not think like that. And I did not grow up like that. And then on top of that, I'm a very progressive thinker and I'm very logical. So that just adding that on top of that, in my head,
mm,
I'm like, nope, it doesn't make sense. Why am I doing it? So when someone is like, oh,
mm.
we need to feed the men, or the men are hungry or something, and I'm like, so the women are also hungry, or things like that. But again,
Mm-hmm.
that's because I
Yeah.
did not grow
I
up the
mean,
typical traditional way.
yeah. Yeah, no, and that's the interesting part about it because like you just said, the lady was saying you're going to make a good wife because of you following these traditions. um I mean, something that I am curious even for myself, and I would want to do some research on it, is to see what from the traditional viewpoint, what was the significance, right? Because
Hmm,
it I'm wondering if these traditions did carry some significance that we are unaware about it because we didn't live these experiences, and we were left, to
true.
create our own experiences and be whoever we wanted to be. So I'm wondering, for example, if um having these discrete gender roles created the chemistry between, a man and a woman, or it just made things simpler to decide whether a woman could be married and a man was worthy of being a husband. So maybe it was a way that these traditional societies figured out how to bring men and women together in a way that hopefully would work out. Um, because something that I'm seeing now is that in this modern way or modern society, it actually requires a lot of self-awareness to be, in a relationship, or to view people, as they are. Like, you really have to know yourself, and have to know how you react to things. Yeah, like this sort of sense of self-awareness. And also you need to be, like, responsible, like making a decision. So now we're just at this point where it's whoever, as whoever we choose, or whoever we choose to marry. It's like, that is your decision. You made that decision based on your own faculty, and you said, okay, this is the person I want to marry. And maybe in these traditional societies, they found this strategy and this system. But then, like we have been talking about, what happens when you don't fall under those systems and you haven't been raised that way. So I don't know. It's just it's a very interesting it's a very interesting thing. But I get you how obviously there's already going to be quite the difference if you had, if you are looking at someone who has the very traditional mindset, because their outlook will be different from yours. Um, so they might find what we are doing or the way modern society is illogical. um, so just trying to bring that
Uh,
balance to, you know, but yeah.
and that would be hard for me to wrap my head around. Like, you find that illogical, but I guess it works. It can work both ways. I guess so. But uh, yeah, I would really have a hard time wrapping my head around that. But I think my only issue is just I feel like a lot of traditions, particularly when it comes to the ones that are affecting women, were based off a time when women were very dependent on men. Um, they didn't have much of a
Mm-hmm.
voice, and they didn't have many opportunities either. You know, the times are changing, times
Mm-hmm.
have changed, and women now have more opportunities, they have more of a voice. So some of these traditions that are stereotypically taught to you as an African woman, me as a Kenyan woman, is do they really do still serve us in this day and age, or is there not room for
Mm-hmm.
improvement or room for changing them? Because I feel like the funny thing is that I feel like these changes have come, but there's still some men who want to keep it as it was because they don't want to change with the times. And I think it's a big
Mm-hmm.
issue. But I think it also comes down to how people were raised. It all comes down to that because if
Mm-hmm.
you're raised with a
Yeah.
traditional mindset and that's all you believe in, you might also end up raising your kids with the same traditional mindset, and then it just goes like that. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we have to credit the fact that we think the way we think has a lot to do with the fact that our parents also had untraditional mindsets. So, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But this is such an interesting topic that
No,
we can delve
that's
into so much more to delve into because we just like basically like a scratching the surface.
no, that's I think you hit the nail on the head again. I think it comes down to, yeah, the parenting piece. Um and and just listening to your story and listening to my story, they're pretty similar. Like there's definitely an outlier because now that I think about it, um, being an adult, I in a way I'm very grateful. I guess I would say to my parents because yeah, I didn't think I couldn't be anything that I wanted to be. Like I didn't really I wasn't the definition of who I was not given to me very early on at all. Um and so I'm very grateful, like now I have this sort of like this template of being like, what do you what do you want to believe in? What do you think, makes good friendships, relationships? And then um and so obviously there's a downside to it. Is I think there's a sort of this outlier effect where because things are not happening in this sort of traditional sense, so there's a feeling of like, oh wow, okay, I think differently on this, so and that's okay. And it's been an interesting journey on that, and then it also means that I have to take this opportunity, and I think we have discussed this in one of the other episodes, like to discover who we want to be. It takes time to be who we want to be, and to actually put into practice, because we don't have these traditional thoughts or these traditional ideas in our minds. So there's a bit of that psychological burden, if that makes sense. That psychological cultural burden isn't there. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's it's something. It's I don't know. It's just something worth reflecting on and just trying to figure out how to navigate it and just be the best versions of ourselves. I would say.
I agree. Definitely a lot to reflect on.
Yeah.
And we can do that in a part two. That'll be really, because I'm really having coming up with some ideas. But yeah.
Yeah, let's have a part two on this at some point. But yeah, just a moment of reflection of our own truths of what it means to be an African woman or how we were raised. So um, we would love to extend this question to you guys. If you're listening, um, what was your upbringing like as a woman? You don't have to be from Africa, but we're just telling our truth. So we would love to know more about what your and what your upbringing was as a woman. What was the messaging that you were told, and how is it impacting you today? How do you see yourself in this modern society? Um, and yeah, that would be amazing. So also, um, give us feedback on how we are doing. We want to get better. We want to grow, and we want to share content that is beneficial to you and also to us, because we want this to be a learning experience for everyone. So you could do that by writing to us at the feminine outliers at gmail.com. And also, you can follow us now on Instagram, which is really exciting. Um, we are working on building our Instagram profile, so just stay tuned to see more
Mm-hmm.
updates on there. So, which is very exciting. And of course, you can listen to us on multiple podcast platforms. We are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. So listen to us, share this episode and all the other episodes, share the podcast with your friends, your family. And if you really like what you're listening to, please like it, subscribe so that you can get an update on the next episode. So this has been fun today, and I have learned a lot and reflected. And so, until next time, have fun, live large, and don't be afraid to be an outlier.